Hi, I'm Giles Martin. I'm here in Abbey Road Studio 2. I was actually born in 1969 on John Lennon's birthday, which fascinated him. He said to my dad, "No, you're not sort of arsehole he's going to turn out to be." It's funny, growing up as a kid, having a father like George Martin, you can't compare it to anything else. I've never actually swapped dads with anyone. But we didn't necessarily, myself and my sister didn't necessarily grow up in a terribly musical house, apart from, as a kid, I noticed my dad played the piano a lot, and odd people would come back and forth. In fact, when I was a playgroup, they went around the class, and I was about 4 or 5, and they said, what do your parents do for a living? And they, my dad's an accountant, my dad's a lawyer, my dad's a truck driver, whatever. And I said, my dad just sits at home and plays the piano. And it turns out he was writing, I think he was writing the music for Live and Let Die, the film at the time. And there's huge embarrassment amongst my parents. They go, he's not employed, he's got a proper job. And so it wasn't a sort of thing. I think growing up I didn't necessarily grow up in a musical household. It wasn't, I had the privilege of meeting people like Paul McCartney at an early age and meeting, the Beatles at an early age, but they were just friends of my parents. It didn't mean a whole lot to me as a kid. I remember when I became interested in the guitar and became interested in songwriting, Paul did say to me, he was incredibly encouraging. He goes, "That's great, I find it difficult to write songs, and I'm Paul McCartney." So I did have a privileged sort of background as far as that goes. My parents were always very wary of me getting a proper job. I learned to play the guitar, as some people might be able to see, quite badly. But behind my parents' back, it was a thing, don't join the music industry. I'm delighted I did. In fact, I really got involved in music because my dad started to lose his hearing when I was about 16, and he needed a second pair of ears, and he didn't really want to tell people he was losing his hearing, so I became his ears to a certain extent. I'd come in and try and help him. Through that, I would learn off him, and we started working together. And it was actually a great thing because I was needed to a certain extent by him, which is nice as a son and a father working together. At the same time, he was always very good. He never had a sort of "that's my boy" kind of attitude. He was always very receptive to my ideas. And in fact, he's been receptive to people's ideas throughout the whole of his career. And he treated me no differently and was always open to my suggestions, however wrong they may be. And God knows I made lots of wrong ones. So it gave me a chance to learn, and gave me a chance to respect him for what he does and what he's done. I never I was never any good at learning songs off by heart. I mean, I bluffed my way through most things. I've never been terribly accurate at playing anything. I can play a number of things very badly, but I was much more interested in playing for a reason. So as soon as I learned to play the guitar with a friend of mine, we started playing in the underground here, started playing in tube stations. Playing whatever songs we could learn, basically, as you do. And my dad was especially distraught by this. He didn't want, George Martin's son being arrested because it's illegal. At that stage, it was illegal to busk. In fact, the way we played it should have been illegal, but it was illegal to busk. And I then got into playing bands. I formed a band, as you do, and I had a great time. I think playing in a band, learning to play an instrument, learning to play a guitar was the best thing I ever did. And not that I practice the guitar or play it very often now, but it opens so many doors as far as if you're willing to play it to people, if you're willing to bore people with it. It's great, to meet people and chat. It's like a great hobby to have. It's better than video games, for instance. And I think that being in a band taught me more about recording and music, fun enough, than being the son of George Martin did. Because if you're the son of someone, people expect you have this knowledge, which generally you don't have. People think you grew up in recording studios. Of course, I'd spent more time in studios than probably other people are 16, but it's still just a row of buttons. If you're 16, it's still just, a compressor. Of course, I know what a compressor does. I hadn't got a clue for a long time because people expect you to know these things. But if you're in a band, especially as I was in an unsuccessful band, you have a chance to make a whole lot of mistakes and learn stuff. And the hardest thing, not that it's a bad thing, but the hardest thing if you're a son of someone famous or a child of a famous person is you don't get that many chances to make mistakes before people go. People are hoping for the second coming. People are going, he's going to be just like his dad. And if you screw up, you're then the other way. He couldn't get a proper job. And so being in a sort of hidden band gave me a chance to learn. And that's what, music is about evolving. It's about discovering new stuff. It's about learning new songs. It's about learning how things work. It's not about playing the same old things every day, then things become boring. After playing in a band, I carried on playing I always played with people, always like going on tour and playing in pubs and clubs. So I thought it was just great fun. And I started writing jingles, I started writing commercials. I started doing gasoline adverts. That was for France. French gasoline was the peak of my life. And that was when I was at university. And then when I left university, I wanted to become a record producer. I wanted to write music for people and produce people, but I couldn't. I didn't have any, what do? You can't go, I'm the son of George Martin, let me produce you, or give me a job. And so I ended up working in press. And at the same time, I started looking at bands. And funny enough, my dad was he was nervous, I think, of me following in his footsteps at this stage. And I saw a band called My Life Story. They're playing My Life Story. They're playing at the Astoria in London. And I went to go see them play, and I thought they were good. And they had a whole lot of strings, and I did an arrangement of them and produced them. And they released a single that became sort of #1 in Melody Maker and Enemy and the Cool magazines. And someone showed it to my dad and said, look what your son's been up to. And I was just doing it in the evenings, as you do if you're a fan of music and you want to get into music. And that kind of opened doors for me. I left the press job and became a producer. Production engineering is something that you learn stuff all the time with, like any sort of music. I mean, I think for me, starting out and how I am now, if I can work in any form of music, I'm happy. It doesn't matter. It's just, I think I produce more stuff now and remix and mix stuff now, probably because in a way it's what people expect of me, and maybe I'm okay at it. The Love project came from the fact that they needed to do a show. It was George Harrison and Guy Liberté, who's the head of Cirque du Soleil, were friends. And they decided to do a show, and they decided they couldn't have anyone singing Beatles songs a la Mamma Mia. They didn't want, a chorus singing Hey Jude on stage. And I think that's the right decision. And so they approached my dad, and I'd just had quite a lot of success in the UK doing classical stuff at the time. And Apple came to see me, and I sat with my dad and talked to them about it. And I said to them, I could try creating a gig that never happened. And Neil Aspinall, who was the head of Apple, said, I'd love, we talked about, because he was their roadie, we talked about their shows. We talked about, starting off with Long Tall Sally and finishing with Twist and Shout, or, creating the thing. And I said, well, listen, with Pro Tools and digital stuff, I can perhaps create a gig that never happened. So, under complete secrecy, I went upstairs here into a very small room and took some material, and I took at the beginning, the drums from the end, and Get Back, because I realized they're the same tempo, and because I thought I'd start a gig, never happened, with a drum solo going into a song, and started moving things around, and people said mashing up. I always thought it was a bit rude. And then thought, how am I going to start this? And got the piano from A Day in the Life and turned that backwards, because I thought if that makes a good ending, it'll make a good beginning as it sucks into the chord from Hard Day's Night. I just had fun, And my view was, if I can impress my dad doing Beatles stuff, then that's pretty good. As a son, you're always trying to impress your dad, I think, or compete in some way. And it just so happened that it was on Beatles stuff, and I was auditioning for the Beatles. And I really thought that they probably wouldn't like it. I really thought people would think this is a really bad idea. It sounds like a bad idea if you just talk about it. And I then took Within You, Without You and Tomorrow Never Knows and stuck those together, because I thought this will definitely get me fired, if nothing else. And they came and they really liked it. They liked the ideas. And so I ended up becoming the sort of legacy which I kind of fought against for a long time. And here I am now in Abbey Road talking about it. Suddenly became part of it, and I backed up all the catalogue onto Pro Tools and started working on this project, which became Love. I came with my dog Stan and went to my room and started working. We had a list. I worked with the director of the show and my dad. My dad would come in 2 days a week, and I'd play him ideas and we'd work through stuff. So he was kind of producing me doing it. But the bosses were the Beatles, Ringo and Paul, and Olivia Harrison and Yoko Ono, who were representing George and John. And it was important that they liked everything. They had to hear everything before it was passed on anywhere else. And the interesting thing about the Beatles, it's such a protected circle, rightfully so, that if you do something and no one likes it, no one ever hears it. You know, and that's actually quite a good thing for me, because it means I could take risks. You know, occasionally people at Abbey Road were sort of, you know, people who hadn't heard anything, which the majority of people here, didn't like the idea of what we were doing, and didn't like the idea of me coming in and changing. People think it's changing history, but it's not, because I'm not deleting anything. I wasn't, you know, I was just really trying to do something different. And Ringo and Paul would come in. The funny thing is they come and listen to stuff, and they're not allowed to take stuff away either. It's not like you give them a CD. The only chance of them listening to the new mixes we were doing was by coming here and listening to them. And then later, as we got the technology sorted out and secure drives were done, I would go and see Yoko and sit down with her and work through stuff. And it's fascinating. For me, it was fascinating because I have no past with them. You know, I certainly wasn't there at the time. And so it's kind of on an even, I'm way down the pecking order, but it's kind of, I meet on an even keel, as it were. There's no history. I have no, you know, experience of anything they did. So it was quite easy for me just to go, do you like it, or what don't you like about it? And they were very proactive in it, all four of them, you know, the two wives and Ringo and Paul. You know, Paul was the one that would give me the fear, because he's such a good musician. I mean, Ringo's a pretty good musician as well, and they'd you know, they know their stuff and they know their own material. And occasionally, in fact, when we were doing the show, I sat down with Paul and I went through each bit and, you know, played in bits in the theatre, and it was great. It was a great evening. And he goes, you know, he said to me, you know, I'd have to say I really like what you've done, and what you've done has been sympathetic with my music, and I really appreciate that. For me, that was just, you know, the best. But when it came to the opening of the show, at the very beginning, when people walk into the theatre and they're sitting down, I couldn't work out because they wanted Beatle music to play, and someone said, well, why don't you just do another 60 minutes of, and I mean, it took me 2 years to do the 90 minutes. So I decided to get as many Beatles on as I could by taking the vocals off, which is difficult with Beatles stuff because there's so much leakage on the tracks, and just play the backing tracks. So it's like the Beatles are playing, they're backing as you walk in. So you have Dear Prudence with no vocal, you know, you have Should Have Known Better with no vocal, and Penny Lane with no vocal. And the idea was that it would counterpoint Because. When Because starts, it's just vocals. So I'm sitting with Paul, and my dad's there and Paul's there, and Penny Lane's playing in the ceiling of the theatre. And Paul goes, and what's this then? And I went, it's Penny Lane. Because I know it's bloody Penny Lane, but what's it doing in the ceiling? And I said, well, I just thought it'd be an idea to, you know, because they listened to everything. I thought it'd be an idea to maybe put the backing tracks up there. And he's like, oh, okay, you know, I'll have a listen. And it's right there, because it is their music. And, you know, and my dad sometimes, you know, he feels embarrassed because it's not his music, and it certainly isn't mine. It is theirs. There were 4 Beatles, and it was their band, and that was it. There's no 5th Beatle. With music, there's things you'd like to do. I wish I could play things better. You know, I've always thought, you know, it'd be great to really learn how to play the bass properly, or guitar properly, or piano properly. You know, but it's just a question of time. Maybe I'll start watching our video tunes and then become a better musician. But you know, I'd like to, you know, work with, you know, a really good young band. At the same time, I'd love to go and do something like the Love Project with something else, you know, with taking stuff and creating, make people listen to music again. The good thing about Love is people do analyze it, people do listen, and people don't have it on the background, they do actually get into it. And that's why we do music. We do music because we're passionate about it. And so, really, I mean, I'm about to write a television thing, you know, it's a question of writing, producing, and being creative. And anything that lets you do that, you take. And every day, I just can't believe I can do this for a living. You know, I was told by my parents for years it's an impossible job to do for a living, despite coming from my background, because I think maybe when I have kids, I'll be doing the same thing. You know, don't go into music. You know, but you do it because you love it, and if you can get paid for it, it means you don't have to do another job to get in the way as well. So it's fantastic. I would say to anyone learning an instrument, anyone, you know, struggling, because let's face it, we all struggle with instruments all the time, and we struggle with music. is that no matter how hard it is, it's hard for everyone. And that love that you have for it, never let go of it, because you might be trying to learn a song and go, I'm never going to learn this. But the fact of it is, you do learn, and you do move on. And the thing to do is never ever give up, never ever lose that drive and that feeling you get when you work something out or you hear some great music, because it's much better than sitting down and watching the telly. I mean, the thing about music is that I think if anyone's toured, I used to tour a lot. You end up kind of working on automatic pilot, and you start amusing yourself with stuff. I was playing bass in a band, and you start playing the same things over and over again. And I was once in Germany, and I used to jump off the stage, and I jumped off the stage, and I had no idea until I left the how far I was jumping. We played the end of the concert, and I jumped off the stage, and there was no crowd there. I mean, let's face it, we weren't that popular, but there was a break before the people. And I launched off the stage, and seeing the band's faces, and they looked at me, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die in a shit club in Germany. And I dropped about 12 feet. My bass amp almost followed me, because I didn't have wireless or anything. The bass, it was like Wile E. Coyote. My lead unraveled. It was the only thing that kept me alive. And an Ampeg SV200 or they called came crashing down afterwards. But yeah, I spent most of my time being laughed at by people. I think it's important. I think it's important in studios to have a good laugh. It's funny, I mean, it's the Beatles. It's one thing that was shocking for me from listening to all of the tapes, everything they did, was not how serious it was. It was how much kind of fun there is in the tapes. Even when you think, oh, the White Album they didn't get on, they're really cracking up most of the time. And it's kind of, you forget that actually they came to the studio to have a good time, and all the other stuff you read about happened in offices and accountants and all that sort of stuff. Most of the studio stuff is great. And that's the thing about music. Music should be fun. If you're learning music, have a laugh with it, and don't sit on your own and do it. Find someone to play with, because the great thing about music is there's always someone worse than you. I mean, in my case, you really have to hunt them out, but there is, and so show off to someone. Well, the great thing about the internet is the fact you can delve into the world of songs and work out chords. And one of the problems I struggle from is you look on the internet, and quite often the chord sheets are wrong. There's some guy going, if you know the right way this song goes, please write in. You think, oh, that's no good. I can work that out. And the great thing about iVideo tunes is it breaks down that barrier, and you're suddenly being taught by professionals. You're suddenly being taught in a simple way by professionals. It's kind of inspired me. I saw iVideo tunes before I got involved in it, and it's inspired me to going, right, I'm going to see if I can learn the piano better now. And I think that's a great thing. People don't have access to the best people in the world, and now with iVideo tunes they do. You can be taught by some of the best people, from home, and the way it's shot and the way it's done is very simple. If I can understand it, it's very simple. So I think it's a great thing. It's a great learning tool for people, and I think hopefully it'll create great musicians in the future. Hi, I'm Giles Martin. I'm here in Abbey Road Studio 2 to talk about Yesterday. Yesterday was recorded on the 14th of June, 1965. It's the most covered Beatles song of all time. And it's funny, on that day, you think of people going to studios and bashing out, maybe recording a vocal for something. But on that day, Paul McCartney recorded I've Just Seen a Face, did the master of that, finished it. Then did Yesterday, and then they finished I'm Down. So it was actually, Yesterday was sandwiched between 3 songs. A lot of press was made about the time, the fact that it was Paul on his own, there were no other Beatles present, and all these sort of things. It was people look back at the beginning of the separation, which is complete rubbish. It's just that they didn't plan on there being no other Beatles on the record. Quite often, one of them would go in and sing their idea, but then when Yesterday was finished, they couldn't think of what else they were going to add to it. And my dad suggested putting a string quartet on. To which Paul was a little bit shocked at the time. He didn't really want to go. He goes, I think he said, I don't want you to go classical on this, don't. He goes, we can try it, and if it doesn't work out, a string quartet's not expensive. An orchestra would be very expensive. So Paul agreed, and my dad worked on the arrangement. But Paul's insistence there'd be no vibrato on the violins, no movement of hands on the violins or the cello or viola. So it was quite hard for the violinist to play it, for the quartet to play it. And they played it down here in this room, very, very close mic'd, which kind of counteracts. If you listen to Yesterday, Paul's got quite a lot of reverb, a lot of plate on his voice, but the strings are actually very close mic'd. I mean, you can really hear the wood of the strings, which is very characteristic of Beatles. And I think Yesterday is more important for the fact that it opened the door to the Beatles as far as they could have any instruments they wanted on their records. They didn't just have to be a four-piece band, they could have anything they wanted. More so than it is a song in a funny way, because it opened Pandora's box for them. Very simple song. I mean, it's been analysed by lots of people, but very simple song. Very characteristic Paul McCartney playing. If you notice, it's not soft in any way. He digs in. He always digs in, and he always sings quite loud. It was recorded, obviously, live. The song itself's in F, but he's tuned his acoustic guitar down a whole step and plays it in G. And it's thumb and plucking throughout the whole song. And it's a performance. And it's funny how, you wouldn't get that with a click track. And overdubbing strings on top. The string quartet moves around him. And we recently looked at Yesterday for the Love album, and we had a lot of discussions over whether Yesterday should be part of this show and the record we did. And my dad said, you can't really not have Yesterday, because it's such a fundamental Beatles recording. And I said, well, everyone knows it. It'd be nice to give people something new. And the funny thing is that he said, well, let's use the strings. And so Yesterday's on a 4-track. Track 1 is guitar, track 2 is vocal, but the guitar obviously and vocal have a leakage on each other. There's 2 microphones like this. Track 3 is strings. And you put it on a string track and it just sounds like Yesterday with a quieter vocal. And I played it to my dad. He went, now play me the strings of Yesterday. And I went, here you are. And he goes, no, I want to hear the string track. I said, Dad, this is the string track. And of course, this was the first time that anyone really had gone into that world of, playing around with pop music and string quartets. And the string players refused to wear headphones. Nowadays you do string sessions in studios, everyone's wearing headphones. But they refused to wear headphones and they had speakers in front of them. So basically they were playing Yesterday to Yesterday really loud. And so if you put up the string mic, you get Yesterday with just the string players a bit louder than they are on the original. So no separation at all. The 4th track has another vocal on it. They obviously decided to do another vocal because they would use it, and they ended up not using it. They ended up, the performance he gave wedged between 2 other songs, was the best he did. And you can hear it in the chorus. There's a slight double tracking on the high note of Yesterday, and that's the other vocal just being pushed up to help the voice. And that's how it was done, a very simple song that's been etched in time forever. Yesterday has a bit of songwriting, as a classic case of Paul McCartney writing a great song just instinctively. One of his frustrations, but one of his genius moments, is the fact that he can pluck songs from nowhere. And Yesterday, he dreamt the melody for Yesterday, woke up in the morning and immediately went to the piano and played it. And played it to a number of people as a working title, I think my dad included, and it was called Scrambled Eggs, because the meter worked. Because he wanted to know where it came from. He'd heard the melody before, obviously in his sleep, and had no idea where it came from. It turned out it was his. It's that sort of thing. It was, it just arrived in his head, which, I wish, maybe I'll go to bed tonight, that'll happen to me. My dad recently was going through a whole lot of stuff, about sort of 5 years ago, and found his old scores, and found the original score of Yesterday, which he has made a lithograph of to raise money, and Paul and him signed it. Paul was involved in it. But it's funny, on looking at the original of Yesterday, Paul came to the session and saw this piece of paper and said to my dad, what's that? My dad went, that's the score, that's the score for the string quartet. He goes, what is it? He goes, it's the music, the notes they should play. He goes, oh, like a blueprint. He goes, yeah. And then he turned over and saw, and I said, Yesterday, by Lennon and McCartney, arranged by George Martin. And Paul looked at it and suddenly realised he was going more classically than he ever had liked, and wrote on it Lennon, McCartney, and Mozart at the bottom of it, and it's still there today.
This is the tuning segment for Yesterday. For this song, the guitar is tuned down a whole step, so while the song will sound in the key of F, the guitar will be playing chord fingerings generally associated with the key of G. I'll play each string. The E string, first string, will sound as a D. The second string will sound as an A. The third string will sound as an F. The fourth string will sound as a C. The fifth string will sound as a G. And the sixth string will sound as a D. And that's the tuning for Yesterday. This is the intro for Yesterday by the Beatles. This song is in the key of F major. However, since the guitar is tuned down a whole step, we'll be using fingerings that are normally associated with the key of G major. The intro has only one chord. It's a G major fingering. So we'll also take this opportunity to talk about the right hand technique as far as the finger style goes. This G major is just a typical shape. The second finger on the third fret of the sixth string, first finger on the second fret of the fifth string, third finger on the third fret of the second string, and fourth finger on the third fret of the first string. This right hand style, normally when people play finger style, they'll use the thumb to pluck the bass notes, and then the fingers 1, 2, and 3 to pluck the treble strings. And you could certainly do that on this song just fine. However, if you watch Paul McCartney play this, he uses kind of an unusual and unique right hand technique. He'll use his thumb to pick the bass strings and then flick the first string, or the first finger, across the top 3 strings. You'll also notice that this guitar sounds quite a bit brighter than what might be recorded on the Beatles record. They would use recording techniques and different microphones for recording acoustic guitars that gives you kind of a lo-fi quality to it, where it might sound a little bit more dull than a normal bright acoustic. So with this right hand technique, we'll pluck just the bass note on the 6th string and then use the first finger on the top 3 strings. And you'll do that 4 times for the intro. Just a little slower. And that's the intro.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks.
This is the verse segment for Yesterday. I'll play it at speed and then slow it down. The verse starts on the same G major fingering that we saw in the intro, and once again the thumb is plucking the bass note and the first finger hitting the top 3 strings. You don't really even need this first finger because the 5th string isn't ringing. On the end of the measure, the last 8th note, you'll remove the 2nd finger to let an open E ring on the 6th string. So you'll hit bass, and then the treble strings 3 times, and then bass, treble, treble, and then the open string. And then we'll go to this F sharp minor chord. Now, we are in the key of G, kind of E minor type of thing. And the normal 7 chord in that key would be an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Or if it was just a triad, an F sharp diminished. However, in this, it's using just an F sharp minor chord, which is interesting because this C sharp doesn't occur in the key of G, so it's just being inserted here. So there's a couple different ways to do this F sharp minor chord. Typical fingering for it would be this, where I'm barring the first finger all the way across first through the 6th string on the 2nd fret, then putting the 3rd finger on the 4th fret of the 5th string, and the 4th finger on the 4th fret of the 4th string. You could certainly do that. That would be sort of a typical way to do it. It does make it a little hard to get to this B7, which is the next chord. The way that Paul McCartney generally would do it, I think, is to use the thumb to hit the 2nd fret on the 6th string, then use the 1st finger to hit the first 3 strings on the 2nd fret, and then have the 3rd finger sort of in the same place on the 4th fret, 5th string, and 4th finger on the 4th fret, 4th string. That's generally the way you'll see him play it. And various other artists also play their bar chords this way. This would be good because even though you don't have to hear the 4th and 5th string, you wouldn't have to worry about hitting a wrong note if you miss just the top 3 strings. The third option would be to fret that 2nd fret with your thumb once again and have this first finger across these 3 strings and just avoid hitting the 4th and 5th string. So any of those 3 options would work for this song. So you'll do that one time. And then the 2nd chord of that measure will be a B7 chord. The 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, 1st finger on the 1st fret of the 4th string, 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and 4th finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string. Now, of course, you won't even hear this note on the 4th string, but it's a good idea to have it there in case you hit more strings than you meant to. So you'll still just hit the bass note and then the top 3 strings with the finger. So those 2 measures with the bass movement would sound like this. Going into the 3rd measure, we have sort of an abbreviated E minor chord with a little walk down. That's just going to be the middle finger, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret, 4th string, and then the open top 3 strings, 1, 2, and 3. Then hit that bass note one more time and the rest of the strings. Then the open 4th string, D string, and then the rest of the strings. That open D makes it an E minor over D chord. The next measure has a regular C major chord. This is going to be 3rd finger on the 5th string, 3rd fret, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret, 4th string, and then 1st finger on the 1st fret, 2nd string. Once again, you wouldn't even need this note on the 4th string as long as you don't accidentally hit it. Then going to a D7 chord. This will be the 3rd finger on the 2nd fret, 1st string, 1st finger on the 1st fret, 2nd string, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret, 3rd string, and then the open 4th string. Then back to the G major chord that we saw before. And then on the tail end of this measure, we'll have a walk down with the G to an F sharp. So that'll take my 2nd finger off of that 6th string, replace it with the 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the 6th string to make a G over F sharp chord. The next chord will be an E minor 7. This is played with an open 6th string, and then the first finger on the 2nd fret 4th string, an open 3rd string, and then the 3rd finger on the 3rd string 2nd fret. You want to emphasize strings 2, 3, and 4 with your finger. The next chord will be an A major. You can keep the first finger where it is on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, add the 2nd finger to the 2nd fret 3rd string, add the 3rd finger to the 2nd fret 2nd string. And there's a little bass movement that happens here. We'll hit the E minor 7 twice, then hit that bass note again, and go to the A note on the open 5th string. The last measure has a C major fingering again. You can just pluck this chord, it only occurs for a quarter note, and then back to G major, which you'll hit twice, and then hit it again with the finger for the last 3/8 notes of the measure to get back into that rhythmic feel again. So I'll play the verse at half speed. And that's the verse section.
Why she had to go, I don't know, she won't say.
This is the chorus section of Yesterday. I'll play it at speed and then slow it down. The first chord in the chorus could be thought of as a B7 sus4 because if we're hitting the top 3 strings with the finger, we're not really having the 3rd of the B7 in there. So it could be like a sus4 would be the E note that we add. So it's a B7, take the 4th finger off, and you get this E instead of the 3rd. So I've still got the 2nd finger on the 5th string, 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and then I'm removing the 4th finger. Now you can still sneak that 1st finger in on that 1st fret. In that case it'd be more like a B7 add 11, but if you're just hitting that, it functions more like a B7 sus4. And then add the 4th finger back to get the B7. The second measure has some 2-note voicings of some chords. You could fret the whole chords. It would be the whole chord. It would basically be an E minor to a D to a C to like an E minor over B. But really specifically, it's just 2 notes out of those. So it would be the 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, and then the open 1st string. And you could just pluck this with the thumb and the middle finger or the 1st finger, either one. Then remove that 2nd finger, put the 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string, and hit the open 4th string. Then slide the 3rd finger up to the 3rd fret of the 1st string, add the 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Then take those same 2 fingers, slide them down 1 fret each. So now the 3rd finger is on the 2nd fret of the 1st string, and the 2nd finger is on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. And then, keeping this finger, the 2nd finger where it is on the 5th string, take the 3rd finger off to let the 1st string ring open. fifth string will continue to ring through that. The next measure, the first chord is an A minor 6. This basically looks like a D7 fingering, but we'll hit the A note underneath it. So with an A in the bass, you have another A and then a C, which is the minor third, and then the F sharp is basically putting a sixth onto an A minor chord. So that's third finger on the second fret of the first string, first finger on the first fret of the second string, and second finger on the second fret of the third string, and then the open fifth string. The next chord is just a D7, so keep this fingering and hit the open fourth string. The next measure will be a G major chord again, and then a bass movement very similar to the first measure of the verse, going to the open sixth string. Then back on the B7 sus4 again, to a B7, and then the two-note voicings once again. Then an A minor 6 and D7 measure. And then the last measure will just be a whole note of a G major. You can strike that with your finger, pluck it, or strum it with your thumb. So I'll play the chorus at half speed. And that's the chorus section. This is the outro section of Yesterday. I'll play it at speed and then slow it down. The first fingering is sort of an abbreviated G chord. It's the top part of this G major fingering. So it's just my fourth finger on the third fret, first string, third finger on the third fret, second string, and then the open third string. You could pluck that, strum it with your thumb, or hit it with the finger like the rest of the chords. Hit that 4 times. Then it'll go to part of an A7 chord. So this just leaves the fourth finger on the third fret, first string. Take the second finger to the second fret, second string, and then once again the open third string. Then part of a C major chord, leave the fourth finger where it is on the third fret. Put the first finger on the first fret, second string, and play the open third string again, just for a quarter note. And then ending on the G major. So slowly. And that's the outro. This is the performance of Yesterday by the Beatles.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far